So please give a warm welcome to this year's recipient of the Nordic Honorary Award, Stellan Skarsgård.
Hej. Där. Vi har ju redan sett så.
Wonderful. Yesterday you received this Dragon Award on Cinema Draken, and now we will have a conversation about your career and your work. And I've organized it into 10 chapters, corresponding to to 10 different films you have made. And we can start with looking at a picture. It's a picture from Bombi Bitt and me, and this is a teenage boy in his screen debut, this TV series. And my first question is, who is this boy, and why does he want to be an actor?
I don't know, he didn't want to be an actor, he wanted to be a diplomat. But he was acting, and he had done some theater, and he worked both in professional theater and amateur theater, and really enjoyed it. But he still thought he'd get a real education and become a diplomat. But then he got so many jobs, so he just gave up on diplomacy and decided to go on with it. I still haven't decided what to do when I grow up.
What was it with diplomacy that was interesting for you? And are you still? What was it that was interested you in a career as a diplomat as a child? And do you still have would you still like to?
No,
have
it was
this
an
kind of
illusion. It was an illusion because the big hero in my childhood was Dag Hammarskjöld, who was a Swedish diplomat who got shot down probably by a Belgian mercenary plane in Congo during the Congo-Katanga crisis. And my idea of a diplomat was someone who traveled the world to make peace. And that is not the true job for most diplomats. They are just megaphones for their governments. So I'm glad I didn't become a diplomat. But I thought that was fascinating.
And after this first screen role, you of course have made so many roles in your career, but it wasn't like a very direct path to becoming this like star actor you are now. How was it to start off in the film industry for you?
Well, what happened after this, I did my first film was something called Strandhugg I somras, and you can hear from the title what kind of film that was. It was a sort of slightly erotic comedy made by Mikael Ekman, brother of the other brothers Ekman. And it was made on a very low budget, and I know my deal for the entire film was 10,000 kronas, and I still haven't been paid. And it was the kind of shoot where suddenly we can't shoot tomorrow. Why? Because we don't have any film stock to shoot on. Okay, so you wait a week, and then a week later, oh, we got some roles now. So then you start shooting again, and that went on. So it was a summer comedy, with love in the archipelago and running hand in hand into the water. And I was running hand in hand into the water in October, and that wasn't nice. But that was my first feature film. But I continued in the theater. I worked in the theater in Malmö first, and then in Uppsala, and Municipal Theater in Stockholm, and then eventually Dramaten. And I did some films during the summers, and I did a couple with Janne Haldorf, and then I did some semi-light porno films with Torgny Wickman, which was a good school. That I don't regret. And it definitely paid my bills because it was slightly better paid than being at the Royal Dramatic Theatre. But then I got fright. I got camera fright. I was afraid of, because I'd made so many bad films. So I couldn't be in front of the camera for years. But then I did a small student film at DE, Dramatiska Institutet, which is the film school in Stockholm, together with Stina Ekblad. And suddenly I felt so safe, and it was so good. And I found my way back to how to live in front of a camera. And after that, I did this film that you just saw. And that's how it started.
Yeah, let's move
Is that
on.
too long?
Let's move on to this film, The Simpleminded Murder, which is one of your iconic roles and one of the iconic roles in Swedish film history, where you play Sven, and I'm sure everyone here is so filled with feelings as you become after watching this film. This was kind of a breakthrough role for you in Sweden, and do you have warm memories of the shooting and the process of making this film?
Of course I do. It was a wonderful role, of course. Hasse Alfredson, the director, came to me and said, "Stellan, I want you to read a script I have." And so we sat on the cafe opposite Dramaten, and he was watching me while I was reading it. And he looked because he wanted to see how I reacted. And that was kind of strange, but it was good read, and I loved it, of course. And I said, I really want to do this. But then this man, it was so fantastic to work with because there was never any pressure. And I definitely got over my fear of being in front of the camera. And he was also very collaborative. So if I had an idea, it was just as much worth as his ideas. And we had a lot of fun. Every weekend there was parties at this Ambumsgården, which was his film farm in Skåne, in southern Sweden. So it was wonderful. But of course it also started my international career because it was a success in Berlin, and then it was shown in some cinemas in the United States, and some people from Coppola's film company saw it, and that led to my first job in the United States, which was a small film for public broadcasting, which gave me an agent there, and I was very reluctant to go and shake hands there, but eventually I started getting more and more jobs.
Let's dwell a little bit on this film, and it's a film with a very strong social message, and you have always been quite socially and politically engaged. And this film is it's about the 30s and the inequality of in society back then. But it's shot in the beginning of the 80s, maybe at the time when Sweden was at its most equal point. How do you see this film in this light, and what is your? Is it important for you that the films you make have a social message?
No, not a social message, but it's important that they say something important about life or humanity or stuff like that. We had a conflict about the ending of this film, Hasse Alfredson and I, because I mean, everything looks old now, but actually at that time he walked into the future because the cars started to become more modern, and you see the police, they have sort of modern gear and stuff. And I said, Hasse, you don't have to show the audience that this could happen today too, because he was so sort of dogmatic and he really wanted to point out the parallels with our present time at that time. And I said, you don't have to do that. It's all there in the film. But then he was, yeah, but you know, but then also the police, if they come in those pickelhuvor, it won't work. Those old hats they had, they have to look terrible in the end. Well, let's do it like this now. So that's how we did it. But I think that I don't want to do totally moral films. I've done some semi-moral films, and that is not the sex films. But I don't think everything in art has to be immediately useful. I think it's useful in a wider sense, because you always give the audience a new pair of eyes to look at the world with. And that means that they get a new perspective, and that's always good education. But it's also like music, sometimes film. Film has to have the same qualities as music, which means that it doesn't necessarily have to explain what you already know about the society today.
Let's move on to the next picture, and this is a picture from Cockroach, where you did the role of Agent Hamilton. And a few years after this, Mikael Persbrandt did the same role, and there was, like, in the newspapers, there was everyday articles about his super body. And but when you were cast for this role, Yang Yu, who wrote the very popular books that this was based on, he said that you were too thin, and there were.
He said I looked like an asparagus.
Yeah, that's what he said.
And
I didn't want to be
as
so
an
rude.
action hero, you don't want an asparagus.
But this makes me think about the body and, like, the corporal. You're a big guy, and I think you always have quite, like, corporal presence in your films. What is your relation to your body in terms of acting? Because you often talk about the face, but what about the body?
Yeah, I come from theater, and I think I've always been interested in what the body expresses. Like when in the film you just saw, the Simpleminded Murder, I had a body that was constantly like this, like as if he was surprised at the world all the time. And that was a physical relationship to the world that he had. And that works on people whether you don't have to explain anything. It's like a dog seeing another dog wagging the tail. It communicates. And it's like ballet that communicates, and you don't know even what happens when you see. I saw with my wife here, we saw Baryshnikov, very old dance at Dansens Hus in Stockholm. And suddenly I started crying, and he wasn't doing jumps, and it was nothing dramatic happening on the stage, but it was something of the human experience that he showed me or communicated to me that suddenly made me cry, and I hadn't cried for 10 years. So I think the body is extremely important, and I use the body very much, which is not the same thing it doesn't mean that I go to the gym all the time. Because I don't. I just recently started because I didn't want to sort of wither away before I was ready for it. So I have to start. I've started with a man called Alexander Stocks, a friend of mine, who's training me, and I said, no pain before, no pain during, no pain after. And then, could you get some of this away? And he said to me, that's a diet thing, he said. And I said, don't touch my food. So I don't train like a lot of actors do, but I'm always body conscious, and I have a different body in this film and I have a different body in Chernobyl. He moves differently. They all move differently, which has to do with their attitude towards life and who they are.
How do you work with that when you're developing the body language and the gestures of a character? How is your process in doing this?
I don't know. It starts with I walk around and I try to feel who they are. It's not a very intellectual job. Acting is not very intellectual in general. So it is. I try to find somebody in this body and whatever this body can do, which is limited, of course.
And then a few years after, in the 90s. You made Breaking the Waves, which was maybe your big international breakthrough still. A film you made with Lars von Trier, the first film that in your long collaboration. And you also had collaborations with like directors like Hans-Petter Moland, who you did very many films with, and you worked with directors like Steven Spielberg, Milos Forman, Gus Van Sant, just to name a few. Like, after making all this film and after meeting so many of these directors, what is your advice to a director? What is the most...
To a director?
Yeah, what is the most important quality in a director?
First of all, that he has something to say, and something that he has to say. If you're not making an industrial production, if you make a big popcorn movie, the director is like in many TV series, you can change director and it won't change anything. They are there to put up the camera, and somebody else is sort of having control over the product, which it is. But otherwise, it's like with any art that doesn't have a sender, that doesn't come out of one subject, is to me not very interesting, which means that it has to be personal on one level or another. That's the most important thing. Then technically, as an actor, you of course want a director who is not only good at moving cranes and cameras, you want a director who is interesting in what's happening between the actors, and most of all, what happens between the actors, between the lines. Traditional television is like, it's so literal. It's everything is in the dialogue, because it's written so that no matter who directs it, who acts in it, the audience should be able to follow it. So there's nothing is communicated to the audience by body language, by how people look at each other. It's all said out in the text, and that is to me, that's something I'm not very good at. I'm really good between the lines. And maybe I shouldn't go into Chernobyl, but sure, it's actually a good example. Johan Renck, who's the director there, he understands it, and the relationship between my character and Jared Harris' character is not on the page. It's not written in the script. The lines we're saying is in the script. But what happens between us is between the lines. And that is what happens between me and Jared in that room. And a director doesn't see that. He cuts to us when we're talking, and then there's nothing.
You mentioned that you argued with Hans Alfredson when making the Simpleminded Murder. Are you an arguing actor? Do you argue a lot with
it wasn't like a fight.
Oh.
I just didn't agree about the ending of the film. And I always say what I think, but it's always up to the director to make the decision. Yeah. So, because as I said, it has to be his film. Yeah. I don't approve of actors who sort of, because if I work with a first-time director and I come on the set, I've done 100 films. Not many directors in the world have made 100 films. So I know more about filmmaking than most of them. So I can say, no, you shouldn't put the camera there, you should put the camera there, and, well, you have to cut between that and that. I could say all those things, but then I would just kill the director, and I'm not going to finish the film. And it has to be his film. And maybe this director has some absolutely new ideas. Like, if I would have said to Lars von Trier the first time I worked with him, no, you can't cut between those takes. You've got to cut between those takes, because that's how you do it. That would have been pointless, wouldn't it? So it's you have to be humble in the sense that you know a lot, but somebody might come up with something absolutely new. So when you start a new product, you know a lot of things, but there's also a lot of things that you don't know, and it has to be the director's film. Did I answer your question, or did I just veer off to something?
No, you kind of answered it.
Kind of answered, yeah. I got a half okay for that.
But I have another question on a little bit of the same theme. How do you like to work with the director or in the process? Like, do you like to sit and like long evenings drinking wine, discussing the characters and what is his motivations, or do you prefer to just you have your vision of the character, you just go with that?
To talk as little as possible, I would say. With Hans Petter Moland, we've always rehearsed a week before we start shooting, but that is mainly to see how the lines work, what lines, and discuss all the things, all the questions, bring up all the questions about the scene, so we don't have to do that on the set when it costs a lot of money and there's a lot of people waiting for us. So don't have those discussions there. So just discuss that. But I don't want anybody to give me a backstory of the character. I don't want anybody to come and tell me this is this and this, and you should play it like this. What I do when I read the script is that I figure out what does the script need from my character, and then it becomes the frame, and then I give myself total freedom within that frame. And when you do a scene, you don't want to know how to do the scene. You want to know what has to be there. That's all. And then you go in and try, and it depends on the other actor how you react. Because only then you can have a true relationship. All this I learned from Bo Widerberg, who was my biggest teacher in film acting, because to him it was all about what happened between the people. And that is the other actor makes me do things, and I make the other actor do things, and that creates a scene, because then you have a connection. A director who has been preparing very well at home and knows exactly how I should play the role, should play the role himself. There's no point in paying me to come and sort of move the way he wants me to move and say the lines the way he wants me to say them. And it's also really, really stupid, because then it will never get better than he could invent at his desk. The thing with a collaborative art form like film is that I get better because of the other actors and because of the director, much better than anything I could come up with at home on my own. And they get better thanks to me. And that's how you build things together that becomes alive, because the hardest thing is to make things alive.
A film like Breaking the Waves is like, this is a film that is really alive, and it's also an example of great acting between two people, you and Emily Watson. And it's one of my favorite love stories also. Do you like making romantic films?
Like this, yes.
Yes.
Actually, when I read the script, read the script, and I came to the end, and I said, "Yes, finally, a love story I can relate to." Because it was not about if they should get married or not. It was about the very essence of love, and it's a depiction of love in a most beautiful way. And there, I mean, the way we work with Lars von Trier here, you do exactly whatever you want. His script is extremely structured and thought out. I told him that the script to this film was like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Jakten på den försvunna skatten, but in melodrama. Because each scene was like the peak scene in the most melodramatic film you could ever imagine. And he said, yes. And if you would have filmed it in a conventional way, you wouldn't have been able to put enough life into it to hide the construction. But the way he shot it, very loosely, and he got so much life, mostly out of Emily, of course, that you don't see the construction. You don't feel the sort of the ideas behind it, and the life trumps the life trumps the ideas, and that's very important. But it spoiled me, of course, because now I want to be able to have the same freedom in everything I do. But I've taught some directors that it's good.
Breaking the Waves was maybe like the starting point for your big international career. And one of the films in this international environment is the superhero films, and especially the Thor film. And this is a picture from Thor: The Dark World, which is heavily discussed online. I read so many articles on this scene and this chalkboard. You play the astrophysicist, Dr. Erik Selvig, and I'm curious about, do you understand what's on the chalkboard?
Actually, I don't understand the physicality of it, but I understand what I have to say. Actually, that scene was not in the script. But when they had finished the film, they realized that nobody understood what was going on. So they needed a scene where at least some of it was explained. So they said, okay, he's in an asylum, he's nuts, he's in an asylum, and he's explaining things to the other inmates there. And that's what he's doing there, and he's nuts. Mr. Lee himself was in the audience there, one of the nuts. So that was to help the audience. Exposition is something horrible in films, and if it's a bad script, you do in dialogue explain what's going on, and that is painful. It's the worst for an actor, because there's no reason for your characters to say those things, to explain what's going on in life, So if it's a good film, the story explains what's going on, and you talk about something else. But sometimes you need exposition, and especially they had sort of created such a complicated story there, and they couldn't get out of it. So they flew me in to just explain the shit.
But the Thor films are two of the many very big Hollywood films you have made in your career. Pirates of the Caribbean, The Avengers, Angels and Demons, just to name a few. And why does everybody in Hollywood want to fly you in to make small roles in the very, very big movies?
To explain the story.
Yeah. Is it that?
I don't know, but it is the first Thor film I did. I was reluctant to do it because I didn't quite understand the genre, and this was before the Marvel universe was sort of all over the place. And it was Kenneth Branagh who was going to direct it, and I have great respect for him, and I like him. So I wanted to do it, and it was, compared to the other films, it was a very slow burner. It was a lot of dialogue, and it was with lovely Natalie Portman that I had worked with before, and so Kat Dennings. So I had a lovely time doing it. But it's the first meeting I had when I was going to start. We had a read through, I think, in Los Angeles, and Kevin Feige, who's the head of Marvel, and the other guys. It's a small group of about 6 people that runs it all, and they're very accessible. I have his phone number in my pocket. You can talk to them about anything. But they were sitting there, and I sat there and I said to them, "This comic book stuff, is there really any money in that?" And the whole table just froze, and they looked at me like if I was an alien. Of course, there was money in it, it turned out. But I just didn't understand it because I never read those Superman or Green Lantern or whatever they were called when I was a kid. So I had no relationship to it. I was not a part of the myths. But when you do those films, it varies. I had to sign up for 5 films when I did the first one, so I was stuck with Marvel for a while. But I really enjoyed it because they are very smart people at what they do. You can't expect them to do something else. You can't expect them to do. You can't come there and say, "I'd like my character to have a little more nuances to my character. Could I have a background that he talks about his childhood?" No. It's not that kind of film. And you understand it. And when you read the scripts, you read, "Oh, this is a good scene," and then it's 4 pages of people throwing each other in walls, and there's things tumbling down, and there's sock, puff, bang, and it's unreadable. And then you just go to the next scene. So I don't understand everything, but I have fun doing them.
During the last time, there has been some discussion after Martin Scorsese made this point about an opposition between cinema and Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. As somebody who is making both Marvel movies and maybe not movies with Martin Scorsese, I don't think you ever worked with him, but this kind of like art house film or serious cinema. How do you look at this opposition, and have you followed this debate?
Yeah, what Martin Scorsese wrote in his article in New York Times was not that it was Marvel's fault, because it's not, and he knows that. It's not Netflix's fault either that the streaming services are taking over so much. The fault is that we have for decades believed that the market should rule everything, and the rich should get richer, and that is the root of it all. Because what has happened is that all the different small distribution companies, all the different cinema companies have been erased. It's monopoly everywhere. And they're not, cinemas and distribution and some film companies are not anymore run of people that want to make money specifically out of film because they like film. They're run by big corporations that want to have 10% back on their invested capital, which means that as long as they sell popcorn, it's fine. That's why all the mid-range films, the films that are lower than $100 million in budget and over $3 million in budget, they don't exist anymore. It's only $100 million films and $3 million films, and nothing in between. And those films were the films that slowly could grow in the cinema. They opened in a few cinemas, and then after people talked about them, and they grew and they grew and they went for years. I know that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was continuously running in Stockholm for 20 years, which is a world record. That will not happen now. And in Sweden, SF had made sure it doesn't happen. So it is this that is the course of the reason we don't have those films anymore. And that's really sad. That means that if you want to make an art film, you have to have a really small budget, and it will probably not be seen anywhere except in festivals. So what happened with all the brilliant writers and directors that were doing all those films? Well, they've gone to television, which is great for television, but it's also great that you can tell stories that is not just an hour and a half or 2 hours, but there are 3 hours, there are 4 hours, there are 5 hours. When they come up to 5 years, I'm not sure about it anymore. But that's wonderful. But it's going to be the same functions, the same mechanisms will kill that too. Right now, everybody's competing about talent, keep competing about content. So they make so many series, much more series than we need, and much more series than there is audience for, because they're all fighting to get a big chunk of the market. And Netflix are buying up every talent they can get. And they're losing money sometimes. It doesn't matter. Get it. Make sure that you get the market. And now Disney's coming in as well. And what will happen eventually is that the diversity in terms of voices will end. HBO is now bought by AT&T. And they've already been told that you can't do what you've been doing. Because what you've been doing is, yes, you've made money, but you've made quality stuff, which means you haven't made that much money. Now you have to make more money. And that means you have to reduce the quality of what you do. So, and that is really sad. So it's not the fault of Marvel, it's the fault of an idea about how the economical systems of the world should work. It's all fiction, but the fiction that we've had for the last couple of decades has led to this.
I wanted to ask you about friendship, and if we look at the next picture, this is a picture from In Order of Disappearance, one of the many films you have made with director Hans-Petter Moland, who seems to be a good friend of yours. You're referring to him constantly. And you also have some other collaborations, like also Lars von Trier you have been working on for a lot. Is friendship and loyalty important for you in your work?
Yes, it is, but I also, to a certain extent, I try to make sure that I do not do a job just to please a friend or to help a friend or anything. In a way, you have to keep it a little separate, because otherwise I would do nothing more than doing the most obscure films with good friends everywhere, in every corner of the world. So that doesn't work. But with Hans-Petter I made, I think, 6 films, and it's not only a friendship, but it's also a fruitful collaboration, because we work very well together, and we have a lot of fun doing it. And it's the same with Lars. I have a lot of fun working with him. It's not the friendship that makes me work with him, but the friendship comes out of working with someone that you work well with.
But so you have a good working relationship to this Norwegian director and to this Danish director. Why are there no Swedish directors that are interesting enough?
Hans Alfredson is dead.
Yeah.
I had it with him. We've made several films together, and then he did one film that got really bad reviews, partly rightfully so, and that crushed him because it was also evil reviews. Vargens tid, what it was called.
But you're still. It's interesting that you are in lots of Scandinavian films. You also have a Norwegian film coming up now, Hope. But is it that you turn down the offers to play in the Swedish movies a lot, or are people too afraid to call you?
I don't care about the nationality of the directors. I mean, I'd love to do Swedish movies. If Hans Petter was Swedish, I would do films with him. Yeah. If Lars von Trier was Swedish, I would do films with him. It's not a national thing to me, and there was for several years the only offers I got from Sweden was to play some serial killer in some Wallander 43 or one of those series of German co-productions, and I never found it really attractive. First of all, because it was such an industrial machinery, and if I play a sort of one-dimensional bad guy, it better be in an American movie where I get a good damage for it.
Yeah, it sounds sound. One of the films that you made with Lars von Trier is Melancholia, and in this film you also play alongside your son Alexander, and you are such a clan now. Like in Swedish film history, we have you mentioned one of the lesser-known Ekman brothers now, and that was this family, and it was the Molander family, and now it's obviously the Skarsgård family. Have you worked hard for establishing this, or does it just happen?
Establishing the brand. Well, hire Skarsgård. It's like hiring a BMW. You know what you get. No, it's not. I actually haven't. I have not had any influence over my children at all since. I mean, they had their puberty when they were like 3 or 4, and they didn't respect me after that. So it's they have made their own decisions about everything in their lives, and I don't advise them because it's their lives. And there's several reasons for not interfering with your kids' lives. First of all, if you interfere too much and they're successful, they think it's thanks to you, and they can't take the credit for it. If they fail, it's because of you, and you get the shit for it. But it's also you shouldn't micromanage your children. They have to. It's also another thing is that your children knows more about the world they live in than you do. Remember that. You think you know a lot because you're older, but actually about their world you know less. So they are the experts on that, and give them that.
And do you have some kind of dream that you want to collect every Skarsgård and put them in same room and make like the most Skarsgårdian movie ever made?
I got all wet on my back here. I don't know what happened. It was a really scary thing. I had all my Skarsgård. We were 25 people in the same pool over Christmas, and that's enough for me. And we eat together, and I'm really happy about that. If we get to work together, which we now and then do, then it's wonderful. Yeah. And I will work with Gustav now in the next film that my wife Megan has written. Which is a great script that will be directed by a Chinese director. It's a Swedish story, so you should have a Chinese director, because it's a kind of cultural appropriation is sometimes really good. Like if you look at what Ang Lee did when he did Brokeback Mountain, that was a Chinese director looking at America. When he did The Ice Storm, that was a Chinese director looking at America. When Wim Wenders did Paris, Texas, that was a German director looking at America. So sometimes it's really good to have an eye from outside coming and looking at your society. And we're making a film about some things that happen in Sweden with a Chinese director, and I'm really curious to see what it's going to be.
You mentioned that you don't give your sons so much advice, but in the next picture, it's from the film Borg McEnroe, and here you play the tennis coach, Lennart. And I'm curious about this coaching thing. Have you had like a coach in your career?
No,
No. Would you like to have a coach like that?
no.
No.
But I'm not a tennis player.
No.
No. Well, some actors have coaches. I don't know if they listen to them, but they have a makeup artist, they have a coach, and they have bodyguards, and they have sort of an entourage of 15 people. And I don't think it doesn't necessarily help.
But you haven't had a coach, and when you applied for a theater school, you were rejected. How did you learn everything?
Well, actors, for thousands of years, actors have learned by acting, and by stealing from more talented and older and more experienced actors. And that's how I did it. Instead of going, you can go to school, and it's fantastic with the drama school that you have 4.5 years to make all the mistakes. And you have absolutely freedom. And you also have 4.5 years to know better than anybody else. But then, when you come out from drama school, usually you collide with the reality. And then it takes a couple of years before you really can use what you learned at school. But I started out, for years I did small roles. I did like 3 or 4 roles in a Shakespeare play in the Royal Dramatic Theatre, where I had 1 line in one, 2 were without lines, and then I had 1 in the end. And I was looking at all Toivo Pavlo and Allan Edwall and all those fantastic actors and all the women we had there. The strongest actors in the theater were the old women, of course, because men doesn't live that long. And they had buried 5 men, and then they were the best at parties. They were always the most admirable to me. But so you steal from them, and you steal from several, so they can't trace it. But that is the school, and there's only one way to learn, and it's by doing it, I think.
Yeah.
And fail, and not be afraid of failing.
Right now, you have just been awarded every week now. Before you got this honorary award, you got the Golden Globe and some critical award, and this was for.
But that wasn't planned. I thought that the only award, at least this year, would be this one. That's what I said yes. If I'd known that, I wouldn't have said yes to this one.
I'm very happy you had so little faith in yourself. Thank you for coming. But this series, Chernobyl, you have mentioned it a little bit, Chernobyl already, and there you were when you were talking about the future of HBO, who is the studio who has produced it. You had some doubts about the future, but still, I think like Chernobyl is of course one of the big examples of like contemporary great TV drama. How do you experience the movement of TV drama and the streaming services and the drama there? Yeah.
Well, HBO has been in the forefront of television for decades now. Television used to be something that the real film actors never would do. But it's not like that anymore. Not only because there's less work, qualified work in film, but because it was so bad. It was those serial television scripts were just written to be done by anybody and as shallow as possible. And I talked about it before. But I was so surprised when I got this script, and they spent so much money on this series. It's like a big budget Hollywood film. The budget was enormous, of course. And they didn't believe it would be a success themselves. But they thought it was important to do it. And that is something. They were prepared to take a sort of what would be considered in Hollywood a not very successful release of the series because they thought it was important. And that is courageous of HBO. Now it became a great success, but that was totally unexpected. And the reason I've tried to figure out why it became a great success. First of all, their courage. That is something that is worth a lot. And if they, by AT&T, are forced to turn every dime and make as much profit as possible, they will never do things like that again. So that's why financial incentive can be as bad in filmmaking as it is in healthcare. Why did it become such a success? Because I think the audience was ripe for it. I think there's so many good series out there, but many of them are slightly sci-fi or supernatural, and everybody's trying to be original and to come up with something nobody else has done, but just because nobody else has done it. And all those ideas are out there. But then suddenly comes something that takes reality seriously and talks about real problems that we have to deal with today, and does it and sees that in real life there is so much drama that can keep you captivated easily for 5 hours. And it's because it's a film not about nuclear power, first of all. It's about what happens when a system that has to be infallible and cannot accept to have any flaws. What happens with a system like that? It might be communism or it might be a religion. But something that cannot have flaws, that has to carry all the truth, they have to negate anything that can threaten that image, which means that you have to start lying. And you have to start to suppress science. You have to start to suppress anything that sort of blurs the picture of perfection. And Chernobyl to me is about how that system created the flaws that led to the accident. But it's not unique for the communist system. You could say that the capitalist system has the same problems, because in Fukushima, that accident wouldn't have been as terrible if the reactor hadn't had some flaws that were there to make better profit for the company. Or if Boeing hadn't been a bit careless to make more money, those 2 planes wouldn't have gone down. So we are fantastic at... Nuclear power is really, really safe if it's handled well. We will have problems with waste, but it is really safe. But the problem is, the problem is humans. If we have ideas that or financial incentives that makes it nice to cut some corners, then we're fucked. Yeah, I don't know. I'm talking a lot of politics now. Sorry.
Let's talk a little bit about The Painted Bird, the film that will have its Swedish premiere here tomorrow. It's a beautiful film. It's black and white. It's one of the most beautiful films I've seen. It's directed by Václav Maroui. I was at the premiere screening in Venice of this film, and a little after the screening, I read an article from a British critic that said you could have made a film about this screening of this film, because it raised so many emotions. There were people crying, there were people walking out, there were people starting arguing. Were you at this screening? Yeah. How did you experience this?
I thought it was fantastic. The walking out was exaggerated. There were a few people that left. Some of them came back. But what I remember from it was the 8-minute applause, because Václav, he contacted me 11 years ago about this film. He had just spent 2 years trying to get the rights to the book, Kaczynski's The Painted Bird. And he hadn't started writing the script yet, but he asked me if I wanted to be a part of it, because he needed some names in it to finance it, because it's absolutely impossible to finance. It's a traditional art house film, but it's not an art house film that is made with a handheld camera in 3 weeks in a kitchen or a very low budget. He filmed it for 2 years, and it's like the old cinematic masterpieces of Eastern Europe, black and white, widescreen. There's almost no dialogue. It's cinematic storytelling. and it's fantastic. And it's a film you wanted to see. So I signed up, and then Harvey Keitel signed up, and Julian Sands, and there was a lot of actors that signed up for it so he could get the money. And he shot it over 2 years. And being in Venice at after that screening, when he had spent 15 years on it, and he looked really tired. But then he had an 8-minute standing applause afterwards, and just watching his face made it all worth it, because you cannot imagine what happened in that head at that moment. So that was fantastic. But that is the kind of cinema that cannot be made today. And that is what I miss, really, because a lot of the storytelling that now goes into television is fantastic. But that kind of storytelling, the big screen, big cinematic storytelling that is not about what people are saying to each other, that is stronger than that, I miss that. And I don't know if we'll see it again. You'll see it tomorrow if you go.
You should definitely go, and we will have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience. But first, I want to ask you a final question. This is a film. It's a historical film. It's about the Holocaust, and you have made quite a lot of films about history. And I wanted to ask you as a final question: are you occupied with your own role in history? Like, what would be written in the history books about you? Do you think about that?
No, I don't care. Oof. No, I'm not saving all the scripts like Berman did to make a museum after me, because I don't care about it. It's not important.
You don't care about like your legacy and what people say about you in 50 years? Or? No. Why?
Because I think now is important, and in 50 years it should be about the people living then. And I got 8 kids. What kind of legacy is that?
Yeah, it's true. Wonderful. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Is it anybody who wants to ask Stellan a question? Yes, here on the first row.
Hi, Stellan.
Hey.
My name is Anders. Which one of your roles has been most challenging for you as an actor?
I will just repeat the question. The question is, which one of your roles has been the biggest challenge for you as an actor?
It's very hard. It's very hard to say. I mean, they are, to me, no role is easy. They're all challenging in totally different ways. And the moment I say yes to something, I regret it immediately. Because I get this cramp, and I get pain in the neck, and I got to climb that mountain again, and I won't be able to do it, and it's really horrifying. But you could say, I can say that on a daily basis, I did this summer. I did Dune with Denis Villeneuve, and in that film I weigh about 200 kilos, which means that the amount of I spent 7 hours in makeup, and then I have so much fat on that just moving is horrible. So physically, that was the hardest job I've ever had.
Do we have some more questions there at the back?
Hi, Stellan. First of all, thank you for all the great movies so far. I'm pleased to see them, and your acting is truly phenomenal. My question to you is, looking at the film industry and all the other platforms you mentioned, HBO and Netflix, what do you think about YouTube and Instagram? Do you feel like we're getting less or more creative? Are we doing less or better content towards the YouTube?
Just to repeat the question is, are we getting less or more creative in the era of YouTube, Instagram, and so on?
Well, I would say that it's not about being less or more creative, it's about what we create. And you could say that there's a lot of things a lot of creativity that has been released by the internet in different ways, and that is fantastic. But it's also consumed in bits and pieces, which means that almost all the content is brought down to a tweet length. Even the YouTube films are usually very short. And that is good for some stuff, but it can't be the dominating form of telling a story. But then on the other hand, you have the TV series that are 7 years long.
All right. So one thing I hope for myself is that you keep on getting more creative. Continuing this process of getting more and more creative for every year, and that we will see many more films or series or Instagram posts with you in the future. So now we have to finish, and so please give a warm applause for Stellan Skarsgård.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Tack Sara.